welcome to My Queer View. Glad to have you guys here with us. Today we're going to talk about the so-called Kill the Gays bill in Uganda, Africa, that has been pushed along, helped, and funded by quite a few right-wing evangelical groups here in the United States, which is why it's important. They are using the African country as a testing grounds to try to implement a theocracy here in the United States. It's really horrible, and it's important that we in the LGBTQ community understand exactly what is happening, and for our allies to understand exactly what is happening. So I'm going to cut to a couple clips of Rachel Maddow from the past month and a half, 2 months, talking about this, and then I'll come back with some more of my thoughts and commentary on what we just watched. Thanks, guys.
This is something the Obama administration also faced. They were able ahead tonight, plus we've got the latest on that ahead tonight, plus we've got a big policy challenge for the Biden administration to talk about tonight. This is something the Obama administration also faced. They were able to basically handle it, basically take a strong stand that made a difference. The Biden administration is now trying to do that too. It is proving to be very difficult for them. We've got an in-depth report on that coming up next. It's all ahead. Lots to get to tonight. Stay with us.
Do you personally dislike homosexuals?
Of course, they're disgusting. What sort of people are they?
That was the president of Uganda in 2014. That was the day after he signed into law a really radical piece of legislation. It was referred to worldwide as the Kill the Gays bill, because the original version of that law called just for that, called for executing people for the grave crime of being gay. Now, if you've been watching this show from the beginning, you might remember that we covered the fight over that law extensively at the time, not just because it was so extreme, but also because there was a big American connection to it. Some of the architects of that bill were Americans, radical, anti-gay, evangelical activists and preachers who went to Uganda to sell what they couldn't get done here in this country to a different country where they thought they could get away with it. These groups carried on a multi-year campaign to get radical anti-gay legislation passed in Uganda. And they succeeded. In 2014, the Kill the Gays law was signed into law in Uganda. And what happened next was interesting. It was not just the expected legal challenges within that country. We also saw a very strong stand from the Obama White House at the time. This was from the Obama administration's press release at the time. Quote, "We want human rights abusers worldwide to know their misdeeds are not unnoticed, and would-be human rights abusers to understand that there are consequences for engaging in such actions. The State Department is therefore taking steps to restrict the entry into the United States of specific Ugandan individuals involved in serious violations or abuses of human rights, including those determined to have committed such violations or abuses against LGBT individuals." That was the Obama administration in 2014. The Obama administration also pushed that country in other really specific ways. They canceled joint military exercises that the U.S. had planned with Uganda. The Obama administration pulled millions of dollars that had been planned to be given to that country in support of their country's policing. The U.S. at the time had planned to open a national public health institute in Uganda. Instead, the Obama administration withdrew the millions of dollars it had planned for that endeavor and moved the entire institute to another country instead. The Obama White House used all these powers at its disposal. And it seems to have made a difference. I mean, those efforts were not the only reason that Uganda's anti-gay law fell apart in 2014, but it fell apart. The law was challenged in court there in Uganda by human rights activists and civil rights groups, by MPs and academics and journalists. It was eventually struck down by Ugandan courts on technical grounds. But the big shove on this issue from the United States, by all accounts, made a difference. Now in 2023, it's back. It's worse in some ways. And this new legislation, once again, comes against a backdrop of Americans being involved in it. Once again, a backdrop of U.S. anti-gay evangelical groups pouring resources into advocating for this anti-gay agenda in Uganda. And now that same Ugandan president, the one who said he thinks gay people are disgusting, he has now signed into law an even harsher piece of legislation than what was passed in 2014. This new bill imposes, yes, the death penalty for what they call aggravated homosexuality. Life in prison for anybody engaging in gay sex. This new law makes it illegal to even advocate for LGBTQ people to have rights. Even advocacy of gay rights carries a penalty of 20 years in prison. If you are LGBTQ, you are living in Uganda right now, it is an understatement to say the situation on the ground there is terrifying. Lots of people are fleeing the country. Other people have not left their homes since the legislation was signed into law for fear they will be targeted either by the government or by mob justice. So it's happening again. This time it's worse. Here's a question for us. Is there an American government response that could be helpful here in the way that the U.S. response, that strong response, was helpful in 2014? How much of a special responsibility does the U.S. have in fixing things, given the role of certain Americans in cultivating this stuff over there? But also, does the U.S. have a special opportunity as a country, not just a responsibility to do it, but an opportunity to help? Given that we've done it before. I mean, so far the Biden administration has talked about measures, is considering measures that very much track exactly with what the Obama White House did the last time around when this was in the headlines in 2013 and 2014. The question is whether or not 10 years down the road that's enough. Whether the U.S. could be doing something else or pushing even more aggressively. Because the Ugandan government obviously knew what to expect from us. They saw it 10 years ago. They went ahead and did it anyway this time, in full anticipation of what we would do. So can the U.S. response be amped up to account for that? For how much more danger people are at, particularly since we are part of the problem for how we got into this mess in the first place. Where do we go from here? Joining us now is Adrian Juko. He is the Executive Director of the Human Rights Awareness and Promotion Forum, which advocates for marginalized groups in Uganda. Mr. Juko helped coordinate the successful legal challenge to Uganda's anti-gay bill in 2014. Once again, he is now being pressed into service. He has joined with other leading gay rights advocates in his country to file a petition to try to have this latest law thrown out. Mr. Juko, thank you very much for being here. It's good to meet you.
Thank you so much, Rachel.
First, let me just ask if anything I said seemed wrong to you, if I got any of that the wrong way around.
No, everything is correct and accurate.
In terms of the U.S. responsibility for things being so bad, I don't want to overstate that. Obviously, this is internal dynamics in your country that are largely driving this. Right. As an American watching this process, though, knowing that Americans have been in Uganda advocating for this, it's upsetting. It's heartening to know that we've made it worse. Have Americans been part of bringing this around again?
Yeah, I think the major question here is around the anti-gay groups, really, American conservatives coming into Uganda and exporting the hate. And if we don't stop it now, I think it will spread to the whole of Africa. Look at what's happening in Ghana, look at what's happening in Kenya. So America still has a big role to play in this.
So the U.S. has been pretty successful in advocating for this in Uganda, but you think that these same anti-gay American evangelical groups want this in as many African countries as they can get it?
That's absolutely their agenda. We saw that recently they had a meeting in Entebbe with the president of Uganda and many other people from across the continent. And this was the agenda that spreads across Africa.
In terms of the situation on the ground right now in Uganda, we've seen a lot of reporting. We spoke with Frank Mugisha on the show a couple of weeks ago about people anticipating the law passing, and now that the law is passed, just being afraid. Afraid not just of the law's enforcement, but afraid that the law effectively gives random Ugandan citizens encouragement to go be vigilantes, to go attack people on their own. Do you see it that way? Is that part of the fear right now?
That's what the law is doing, exactly. One of the uncertainties, if you ask me myself, before coming on the show, I was quite uncertain whether I'm not promoting homosexuality, because that's exactly what it means. We're not so sure what this means. So for an average Ugandan, what I'm doing right now would be promotion of homosexuality. Now, if you think of an average LGBT person, the question is, what's going to happen to me next? Am I going to be picked up and arrested? Am I going to be beaten? Am I going to be beaten by my neighbors? For example, right now we're working on about 7 cases of eviction of LGBTI persons by their landlords since the bill was signed into law last week.
The law was only signed last week, and you've already got 7 cases of people who've been thrown out of their housing by their landlords because of the law.
Absolutely.
When this happened in 2013, 2014, we did see a strong response from the U.S. government. The Obama administration was strongly pushed back, publicly pushed back against it, and it appears from the observers that I've talked to that did help.
Right.
It did have an influence.
Right.
The Biden administration has said a lot of the same things. Is there more they could do? Are you happy with the response of the Biden administration so far?
I'm happy with the response so far, but for me, what I want is that we don't dictate what they say. It's them who decide what they say. Now, I want them to live up to what they promise. That's very important, because if they don't live up to what they promise, then everyone else is watching what's happening. And so Kenya, Ghana, and the other countries also take note, and they'll be like, oh, it happened in Uganda, nothing was done. It can also happen in our countries, and nothing will be done. So for me, if the Biden administration says we are going to do this, then they should do it, because that's important.
So, for example, when the Biden administration says that maybe sanctions on Ugandan officials is an appropriate response here, you want to make sure if they effectively threaten that, that in fact sanctions do follow.
That's what I would say, yes.
Adrian Juko, Executive Director of the Human Rights Awareness and Promotion Forum. I know it is, as you just explained, it is a personal risk for you to be here talking about these things, given the way this law is set up. It makes me all the more grateful that you're here. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Rachel.
Thank you. Good luck. Stay in touch with us.
Thank you.
Adrian Juko is the Executive Director of Human Rights Awareness and Promotion Forum in Uganda. All right, we've got much more ahead here tonight. Stay with us. Executive Director of Human Rights Awareness and Promotion Forum in Uganda. All right, we've got much more ahead here tonight. Stay with us.
So we just heard a lot from Rachel, and this is going to be about 28 minutes, 26 minutes long as it is. So I'm going to label this part 1, and then I'm going to make a part 2 with a small little overview of what we watched, and then give my thoughts about it. So stick around for part 2. Make sure that you guys do like and subscribe. And support the channel any way you can. This is My Queer View.